UPSC does not ask you about chapter. UPSC asks you about theme. So this thematic understanding is going to help you in order to make the notes, in order to solve the answers that UPSC is going to ask, so that you will get an idea and you will then go through the NCERT, you will try to decode it for you, and then eventually you should also make the notes from that particular NCERT. How Gandhiji eventually evolved this particular strategy of Satyagraha? Hello everyone, I am Vishal Salkar, and today we are going to continue with the series that we had started regarding decoding the NCERTs, right? So in the last discussion when we met, we had discussed about class 8 NCERT for history, and specifically there were 3 chapters that we had to discuss. And we have tried to get an approach, and we were discussing about a 5-layered approach in order to cover the NCERT specifically from the perspective of history. And let me again give you a detailed idea about what exactly were those particular 5 layers of NCERT. The first important layer is about the data, fact, along with that certain type of timelines, including the key personalities, events associated with the same. So first thing is the factual layering. So the facts, data, other things pertaining to the fact, important personalities, those particular things are going to be the part of the first layer. The second layer is going to be the important key terms. So there are going to be certain type of key terms which are the concepts, which might be certain type of subject specific vocabulary. And that particular vocabulary is going to help you in order to solve question, because UPSC, when they are going for asking question about those particular terminologies, they will be using generally those subject specific vocabulary, and that particular subject specific aspects are going to help you in order to understand the meaning of the question, and also whatever you are writing in your answers, you are noting down in your notes, that will be having comparatively more weightage. The third layer is about the cause and effect. So basically there will be some series of events, and those particular series of events are going to lead to the larger phenomena. Just say, if I say you that there is a rise of nationalism in India, so there must be certain type of factors which were behind the scenes which were leading to the rise of nationalism in India. There may be education, there may be certain type of dissatisfaction, there may be rise of the political organization, and eventually those things will merge with each other, and that will lead to the rise of nationalism in India. So third thing is the identification of the causes and the effect. The fourth thing is identification of the theme. Because once you have identified the cause and effect, now it's very, very important in order to understand it what exactly is the theme, because UPSC does not ask you about chapter. UPSC asks you about theme, and this is across the chapters. Let's say the one theme might be women, another theme might be nationalism, another theme might be the peasantry. In that particular case, they will go across time and space, and they might ask you the question regarding those particular theme. So this thematic understanding is going to help you in order to make the notes, in order to solve the answers that UPSC is going to ask. The last thing is about the present connect. Whenever you are going to write the answers in the examination, generally you will observe one approach, that UPSC does not necessarily ask you question only about history. They might be asking regarding how those things which were part of the history, how they are current relevant. Right? And in that particular sense, what exactly happens, that suppose karo there were certain policies like censorship policy of the British during the colonial era. Now recently also we have observed in different parts of different countries, there were instances jahan par censorship hota hai, whether the press, freedom of speech, and many other things are getting intervened. And those particular things highlights that whatever was going on in the past, similar traces we can get over here also. Previously there was a set of colonialism, now there is a modern day colonialism or the neo-colonialism. So how those things which were in the past are affecting the present, and how they are impacting those things is very, very important. And UPSC asks about the present relevance. So that means these are the 5 factors which are very, very important from the examination perspective. Now the key is to understand how to decode these particular 5 layers and take the content from the NCERT given in these particular 5 headers, and if you are able to do this, then you have already decoded the NCERT. So the NCERT we are going to discuss, regarding which the approach we are going to talk about today, is the India and the Contemporary World Part 2 class 10th ka NCERT hai. And then there are total 5 chapters. The chapters including the rise of nationalism in Europe, the nationalism in India, next is making of a global world, age of industrialization, and lastly the print culture and the modern world. And that's what we are going to decode, and we will discuss for a few chapters. Initial chapters we will discuss in more detail in order to give you the broader idea, and then later on I'll just skim through this so that you will get an idea, and you will then go through the NCERT, you will try to decode it for you, and then eventually you should also make the notes from that particular NCERT. So this is the comprehensive set of content that we are going to talk about, right? So this is the 5-layer reading framework: factual spine, the concept, cause and effect, pattern, and the present connect, right? So this we have already discussed. Now let's start with the chapter number 1, which is the rise of nationalism in Europe. Now, in the rise of nationalism in Europe, the first thing is regarding the key dates, because we are talking about the first layer. The first thing is regarding the key dates and the event. So when you are going to decode and take the key dates and event, like last class mein we have talked about, that you should not just try to mug up the details. Here what you should do, you should go a step further, and you have to have an idea regarding why this thing is happening and how this thing eventually affected the later course of events. Jaise, there is French Revolution, so there must be certain type of causes behind the French Revolution. You will eventually read in the chapter regarding the French Revolution. Apart from that, what were the significant events? Because the French Revolution later impacted different other national movement, including the freedom movement in India. So that's what is the why and how wala aspect from the specific thing provided in the book. Then it is the first clear expression of the nationalism. Then in 1804, Napoleonic Code. So Napoleonic Code, basically you can relate it with the constitution, because the way rights and the things are provided to the population, that particular things is enshrined in the Napoleonic Code. 1814-15, Congress of Vienna. Now Congress of Vienna kya tha? Why that particular Congress of Vienna had held, and eventually how it had impacted the course of subsequent events. Because see, once there was rise of Napoleon Bonaparte, eventually there was rise of the Napoleonic system, and in the entire Europe it was the Napoleon's to some extent we can say the sovereign type of power, because wherever the Napoleon and his forces were going, they were conquering different regions, and eventually there was rise of nationalism. And that same nationalism eventually resulted in the defeat of Napoleon in 1815, finally in Waterloo. And after that, there was Congress of Vienna, and there was development of a new system that was known as the Metternich system, right? So these things are provided over here. Now, Congress of Vienna, one such factual thing. Now, like in the last discussion we have talked about, if you will make a type of timeline, so you will get to know about the specific theme in a timeline manner, and there you can relate that how that particular thing had happened and why that particular thing had happened, how they shaped the future events. So that is about the key dates. Apart from that, key personalities. Now, while reading, you will come across many personalities. Now, you will get an idea regarding which are the most prominent personalities in that particular regard. And for those personalities, if their contribution is mentioned over here, well and good. Otherwise, just take a note of that personality, and then eventually, if you will find out anything in future, because of any, let's say, current affairs coverage or maybe any other subjects coverage, then you should have an idea. For example, yahan par there is Napoleon Bonaparte, Metternich, then Mazzini, then there is Garibaldi, there is Count Kever. Further, you will read regarding Bismarck, and then there are like kings like the William I and all. So basically what's going to happen, that now once you have read about these personalities, now these are very significant personalities. Each of them have contributed significantly. Napoleon Bonaparte, rise of after the French Revolution, he gave further direction to the French Revolution, eventually raised the rise of nationalism in the France. Eventually, there was a rise of Metternich also, because as a counterproduct to the revolution, Metternich who restored the conservative order again. Then Mazzini, Garibaldi, Count Kever, they were associated with the unification of Italy, specifically unification of Germany. May you will read regarding the King William, and then there is Bismarck also. So these personalities, these should not be to mug up. You should have an idea that how these personalities are contributing to the revolution. So You have an idea regarding that this is the Italian unification, this is the German unification, this is, let's say, the French Revolution, and then key personality associated. Through this, you will get a sense of whatever you are noting down. The next important thing is the layer 2, which is the concept and terminologies. Now, over here, there are concepts like nation states, concepts like liberalism, conservatism, Zollverein, then there is proto-nationalism, feminism. So like nation state, now once you have read this particular term, you might be knowing about nation, which is the sense of oneness. You might be knowing state, which is basically a type of geographical expression, right? Now, what is nation state? What are the key characteristics? So if you get the clarity regarding this concept of nation state, now for different subjects, whether it is international relations, whether it is world history, now you will be having an idea regarding whenever there is mention of the nation state, what is exactly the meaning of this. Similarly, liberalism, polity mein you will get the idea regarding liberalism, society mein you will get an idea regarding liberalism, in the international relations you will get an idea regarding liberalism. So through this you will get clarity what exactly is the meaning and what are the different manifestations. Similarly, Zollverein, conservatism. Zollverein is basically a custom union that was created in Germany. There were different German speaking regions. In order to integrate that economically, this Zollverein was created. Now right now if you talk about different blocks, which are the free trade blocks, and that particular thing was similar as the Zollverein. There is conservatism, there is proto-nationalism, there is feminism. So different key terms are there. Like in the last discussion when we were talking about, there was a different key terms. We have seen subsequently to the chapters, we had seen certain important key terms. Now these might be the definitions, these might be the concept, and these are going to help you in order to deconstruct that particular chapter comprehensively, right? The next is regarding the third, and we can say the most important aspect to be decoded, which is the cause and effect relation or the cause and effect chain. Now see, this is, you can say to some extent, the ultimate crux of the chapter, because if you have clearly noted down, if you have clearly identified this particular crux, then believe me, you know now what exactly was that particular theme and what exactly was mentioned in the chapter. For example, now once you have read a chapter, now try to identify what different things you have read in this chapter. Means whatever causes and consequences relations that are emerging from this chapter. For example, there is chain 1, which is how the French Revolution created nationalism. Now French Revolution raised the aspiration for the nationalism, and that eventually inspired many other revolutions subsequently, even including the freedom movement in India. Now what exactly had happened? French Revolution hua 1789. There was transfer of sovereignty because French Revolution replaced monarchy with a type of system jahan par there were elected representative. So from the monarchy, power transferred to the State General. State General mein aakar then there were different representatives. Now the previously there was nobles and clergy which was being provided with comparatively more power. That distinguishment was removed. Then there was sovereignty transferred from monarchy to citizens. Now all are equal. But abhi tak there is no rise of the Napoleon Bonaparte. After that, there was creating collective French identity. It talked about the fatherland, it talked about the citizenship, it talked about the tricolor, it talked about the National Assembly. So basically, whatever you can assume that is going to happen in a type of model jahan par people are getting right, the republic model. That means now there is the elected representative. So there were common laws, there were common language, abolishing the internal custom. What exactly happened after that? Because there was a rise of the French armies carrying the nationalism abroad. Now, eventually this will provide the avenue for certain military leadership to rise, and that's where there was a rise of the Napoleon Bonaparte, right? और उसमें बहुत सारे और फैक्टर थे. Means there was a rise of corruption within the system of France, right? And that's why there was consecutively there was change of the government, there was a rise of the Jacobean Club. After that there was execution of the Robespierre, right? And eventually after that there was rise of the directory government. उस directory government में भी जब when directory government got corrupt, after that replacing that directory government, there was a rise of the Napoleon Bonaparte. So basically in this chain we are talking about how French Revolution created nationalism. कैसे French Revolution ने nationalism को inspire किया. Next is Napoleon, liberator turned oppressor. Now you can assume UPSC also asked in this manner that Napoleon, who was the child of the revolution, eventually resulted or becoming the killer of the revolution, right? So liberator turned oppressor. How it had happened? So Napoleon's administrative reforms 1804 में वो Napoleon एक code लेकर आता है, right? There was civil code. equality before law, right to property, abolish feudalism, uniform laws, standard weights and measure. Now these are the aspect of the civil code of Napoleon. That means if there is a question regarding the civil code, you know what exactly was mentioned. Then initially it was welcome, because now what it is talking about, it is talking about giving more power to the people. People will accept it with the both hands, right? Ki we are getting power. But eventually once people started getting power, people will be feeling empowered also. And now if there is any person from the outside is trying to oppress them, then the people will come and resent that individual, right? So what happened exactly after that? Increase of taxation later on, censorship, forced conscription, right? But after that, local population started getting turned against or turning hostile against Napoleon. Just what I say, nationalism got directed against the Napoleon. So the Napoleon which created nationalism, which we have seen, or we can say French Revolution created Napoleon, Napoleon created further nationalism. That particular thing was targeted against him, and then eventually Napoleon ka jo defeat hota hai, behind that particular defeat, rise of nationalism was also one such issue. Ironically, Napoleon's conquest spread very nationalism that would defeat him. And eventually after that, Leipzig and then Waterloo mein he got defeated. Third, conservative reaction and the revolutionary response. So we should be having an idea regarding this. This can be another chain. Then next, economic nationalism leading to the political unification, because we have talked about a concept, Zollverein, how that economic cooperation ensured that this cooperation is helping people, and this particular cooperation is now ensuring that now people who are speaking same language, different currencies are there. If we are going to abolish different currencies, if there is only one currency, the trade will be seamless. Now this economic cooperation is becoming economic nationalism, and this economic nationalism will say then later on ki bhai, when we are cooperating, we are getting economic benefits, so why not to create a single unit which is representing all the Germanic tribes, or basically all the Germanic regions. And that's where the rise of unification of Germany and aspiration of the unification of Germany was there, or ultimately there was rise of Germany. The next important layer is about the themes and patterns. So when we are talking about the themes and pattern, let's talk about first theme, like culture as a vehicle of nationalism. Because see, in this particular chapter you are going to read regarding the French Revolution, you are going to read the subsequent movement, and that's where you will identify that culture is one such theme which is basically behind the nationalism. So how culture is deriving the nationalism. Then women's exclusion from the very movement that claimed freedom. So women as a theme is important from different angles, right? Now in this particular aspect, this French Revolution talked about that all are equal. But then later on, the Napoleon's code or the Napoleonic code talked about the rights of man and citizen. So the women started getting oppressed from there. But later on, जब Frankfurt Assembly बनता है 1848 के around, now the women were not allowed to take active participation. But then women silently, they created their own set of political organization and started asserting their rights. Now this is not only related to this chapter, but across the dimensions, across the time and space, whether you talk about the ancient Indian Vedic time period, or maybe any other time period during the freedom movement of India also, you will observe that how women initially got sidelined from different type of movement. Later on, they became the champion of those movements, right? So this is another important aspect. Next is paradox of nationalism. So the same nationalism which was being utilized as an avenue in order to create or in order to raise the aspiration, the same nationalism later on created the oppression. Initially the nationalism resulted in liberation of the people, but this particular liberation of the people ke context mein what happened, that once the nationalism got further increased, after that what started happening, now this nationalism ke lines pe now the people were disciplined, and eventually this nationalism resulted in the oppression of the people also sometime, because now this nationalism gave rise to certain leaders. Eventually you will observe there was Mussolini, there was Hitler, and what type of feeling they have ignited? They ignited the feeling of nationalism, and that particular feeling eventually led the oppression. Similarly, economic integration as the precursor to the political unification. Again, another thing, just right now you are talking about free trade agreement. That point of time it was Zollverein, and then eventually that particular thing is going to talk about like how that is a precursor to ensure that how economic integration will further provide you avenue कि भाई इसमें तो benefit हो रहा है. Then you will think that in other areas also I am going to cooperate, and that's how you will get a comprehensive set of cooperation, and that will lead to the integration. Lastly is the present connect. So this present connect, as last time also we have talked about, like there is Zollverein. roughly in 1830s के आसपास आता है. Later on we see the European Union, again the type of union or the economic union. ASEAN, it got inspired from the European Union. Now there are regional economic integration again. So you see the chain of events, right? Similarly, Balkan crisis, it was a type of ethnic crisis. Different ethnicities are talking about secession. This eventually created the contemporary ethnic conflicts, right? That is also one such thing. Now women's exclusion from the nationalist movement, right? So we have seen that women generally were being the main aspect or main, we can say, the actor within that particular movement. But then those particular movements, say, from taking active participation, women were barred. And that's why the women's exclusion from the nationalist movement eventually presently also can be observed in different avenues. Whether you talk about the various countries in the West Asian region, या फिर आप देखो present day Europe में कुछ जगहों पर there is still the women participation is lesser. And even in India, with respect to the women reservation related act for the membership in the parliament and the state legislative assembly, that particular thing is the present relevant aspect. Next is nationalism versus imperialism. So this is also a contemporary type of debate. Now see, what we have discussed is identification of certain important fact, having a note of that, having an idea regarding why we are noting down those things, why we are reading at the first place those particular aspect. Next is then identification of the conceptual aspect, key concepts, then the causes and effect relation, and this is going to ensure you that you are getting crux of that particular topic in your notebook. Then next is the theme and pattern identification, and lastly the present connect. Now for another chapter we will talk about in detail, and then we'll just skim through, we'll just read those things, right? Next chapter is the nationalism in India. So this nationalism in India now specifically talks about how there were different things that eventually led the rise of nationalism in India. Now factual spine में there were key dates जैसे Gandhiji's return from South Africa, his experiments in South Africa, and then his arrival in India 1915. Now why that was a significant event, now why and how you should relate with each and everything that we are talking about. 1917 Champaran Satyagraha. Now why that movement was there and how that particular movement was significant from the perspective of rise of nationalism in India. 1918 Ahmedabad Mill Workers Satyagraha. So in the wake of the World War I, there was demand from the side of the workers in order to raise their wages, and that's why Ahmedabad Mill Workers Satyagraha was there. And then there was Kheda Satyagraha in Gujarat again in 1918. These were the prominent early Gandhian movement that ensured that nation is right now ready for launching the popular movement. Then later on there was Rowlatt Satyagraha in 1919 that was being talked about. But after the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, or we can say the violence that had happened in the Jallianwala Bagh, after that Gandhiji thought ki now I will take back this particular movement. But then the mahal, or we can say the atmosphere in the country, was politically charged, and that's where there was a rise of the popular movement in India. Personalities, again similar thing, Mahatma Gandhi, Shaukat Ali, Muhammad Ali. Then there are personalities like Baba Ramchandra, then Alluri Sitaram Raju, then C.R. Das, Motilal Nehru, Jawaharlal Nehru, Subhash Chandra Bose, Vallabhbhai Patel. Many prominent, many significant personalities are there. Having an idea about those personalities and their brief contribution should be the prerequisite for this examination, and that is available in the NCERT. Next is the concept and the terminology. So there is concept like Satyagraha. What exactly Satyagraha? How Gandhiji eventually evolved this particular strategy of Satyagraha. Next is Swaraj. How the Swaraj is different from the Western concepts, right? Because there is a dominion ka concept. How the Swaraj is different from them. What is the difference, exact difference between the terms like Satyagraha, or basically is it only the truth, is it only the non-violence, or there is any difference between them? What is the role of truth and non-violence in any national movement, right? Non-cooperation, what do we mean by non-cooperation? How non-cooperation is different from the civil disobedience? So if you know the concepts clearly, if you have an idea regarding the terminologies, then eventually you will be in a better position to answer the questions. Because see, कई बार होता है when UPSC is going to ask certain question, in those if we are getting confused between two similar looking terms, then the chances are high that there might be the wrong marking from your side in that particular answer, and that's why it is very important in order to have the idea regarding the concept and terminology. Next is the cause and effect, again the very important crux of this particular chapter. Now obviously we have not included all the set of chains, but then we have tried to give you an idea regarding what are the important aspects. जैसे Chain 1, World War I creating the conditions for mass nationalism, means World War I was also one such prerequisite, or we can not exactly prerequisite, but one such factor which eventually resulted in the rise of nationalism in India or mass nationalism. क्यों? Because World War I ने क्या किया? World War I created the huge increase in the defense expenditure. Now once defense expenditure बढ़ेगा, who is spending? Britishers. Whose money they are taking? Indians money, right? Now for that obviously they have taken war loan, they raise custom duty, they increase income tax. Now ultimately the operation is going on whom? It is on the common masses, and that's why common masses faced suffering, and there was rise of the prices, and eventually 1913 to 1918 there was multi-dimensional rise in the prices, and eventually the sufferings was also rising. Then there was forced recruitment in the villages, because there was many such people who were taken from the villages and sent for the fighting also. There was subsequently there were famine like situation, crop failure, because the food grains were diverted for the soldiers, और उस वजह से होता क्या है, there was the plithy conditions also, there was rise of the influenza, there were many deaths that were being reported. So this was the chaos wala situation. Now in this situation Indians thought कि भाई देखो, we are supporting the Britishers initiative, so we should get certain benefit out of that. But once that particular hardship did not end after World War I, and they did not get anything good out of the Britishers after World War I, no such type of commitments were fulfilled from the side of Britishers, and that's why now the Indian people thought ki it's the best opportunity in order to take the things in our own hand and create the mass movement, and that's why the fertile ground for the mass movement had happened. Similarly, Rowlatt Act to Jallianwala Bagh massacre. There was Rowlatt Act, so it was a wartime टाइप का एक्ट था जिसमें विदाउट एनी टाइप ऑफ ट्रायल, विदाउट लिसनिंग टू योर पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू, यू विल बी टेकन टू द जेल. So Gandhiji called for the nationwide satyagraha against this. There were hartals, strikes, rallies. Then British administration arrested local leaders, even the barred Gandhiji, right? So उसके बाद क्या होता है? There was police firing on the procession. There was widespread attack, and eventually on the day of the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, the people who were doing the peaceful protest in the region of the Jallianwala Bagh Maidan, or eventually giving basically a type of, what we can say, the type of peaceful ultimatum to the Britishers. But then Britishers under the leadership of General Dyer arrived over there, and they started killing the people. They gave the order in order to shoot the people who were in that particular assembly. And now that particular thing eventually resulted in the mass violence, right? And that particular mass violence which was being done by the British colonial power, now that particular mass violence channelized the anger amongst the people, and now the people are thinking कि भाई देखो, कहीं ना कहीं we are getting oppressed, and these Britishers, whenever they want us, whenever they want to kill us, they are killing us. And that's why now it's the apt time in order to create the nationalism in that particular level, jahan par it will be the direct war against the Britishers. So from the non-violent perspective also, and from the violent perspective also, both the side of streams you started seeing after this particular Jallianwala Bagh massacre, right? Similarly, non-cooperation movements rise and fall, because after this there was rise of the non-cooperation movement. Simultaneously, after World War I, there was an issue with respect to the Khilafat, and then after that Khilafat movement was launched. So Khilafat non-cooperation movement was initiated, and after that there were certain things that were done, like the promotion of Swadeshi, promotion of the indigenous aspects, right? But then eventually there was a rise of the violence, just where say Gandhiji had taken back this particular movement. So what was the rise and fall of this movement? Causes and effect, you should be having an idea. Next is the theme and the pattern, the layer 4. Like theme is like diversity within unity, because in the nationalism ऐसा तो नहीं था, there is only one stream. There were multiple streams within nationalism. There were peasant stream, there was tribal stream, there were women, there were like different other sections of the society, there are deprived sections. So different people have their own set of thoughts regarding the freedom, how it looked like, and eventually what we will get after getting the freedom. So through this they were having different set of people were having different expectations, and how that particular expectations eventually met, that was the major issue. तो उस वजह से क्या हुआ, whether it is communist, whether it is peasant, whether it is tribal, whether it is women, all were started attaching themselves to a set of outputs that they are going to get after this particular fight with the Britishers. And that's why this particular diversity was observed within the unity. Unity was led by the Indian National Congress, and then that particular diversity which can be seen within Indian National Congress because of the opinion of different section of people. Now, it was basically the problem of representing everyone. And right now also you will observe that, see, India is a country of diversity, and that's why all the people might not agree on the single point of view, and that's why there might be issues also on sometimes. Limits of the Gandhian nationalism, because generally you have seen that there are good things about the Gandhian nationalism, truth, non-violence, even eventually leading the successful mass movement, but then there are certain limits also, and these limits were being plugged by certain revolutionaries. So never forget about the contribution, those was being that particular contribution was being provided by the revolutionary also. So the limit of the Gandhian nationalism was there. Then the symbols, rituals, and the nationalism, because see, abstract nationalism might not be long lasting phenomena, and that's why you will start attaching yourself. So conceptualization of Bharat Mata, conceptualization of tricolor, right? All these things are giving us an idea, treating the past and giving us the present connection with the past. So giving certain symbols, certain meaning from the past. There was rise of the paintings, rise of certain type of cultural ideas, and all these are the symbols and rituals, and associating it with the nationalism. Lastly, the radical nationalism versus non-violent nationalism, both the streams we have seen. We have seen the movement led by the prominent personalities like Bhagat Singh, Rajguru, Sukhdev, Subhash Chandra Bose, Chandrasekhar Azad, prominent personalities. Then there was non-violent nationalism also, the constructivist versus non-constructivist within the Indian National Congress, the prominent personalities including Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. Then there were other prominent personalities like Rajendra Prasad, apart from that Pandit Nehru, right? So there were different set of personalities, and not to forget Gandhiji. Lastly, the present connect. So how Rowlatt Act, because it was a type of, we can say, curtailment on the freedom of speech and expression, UAPA, NSA, then different preventive detention laws, presently also they are there. Then Pune Pact and separate electorate, right? So that talks about the reservation, so reservation debate today. Next is Hindu-Muslim unity and the communalism, contemporary minority rights. So different time periods pe the things were there, but yes, the meaning sometime gets changed, but eventually the aspect remains more or less similar. Okay. So these two units we have comprehensively talked about. Now let's talk about the third, fourth, and fifth unit in very brief. So like in the third chapter, again the factual spine, it is regarding the making of the global world. So it talks about the globalization. So in the factual aspects, it gives an idea regarding the pre-modern world and the event. Then eventually 19th century events and India specific events. Now, what is your task? You should go NCERT book mein and then eventually take down these particular terms. Then concepts mein like globalization, Silk Route, proto-industrialization, indentured labor, Bretton Woods system, right? And these things, don't forget that UPSC keeps on asking about these things. UPSC have asked regarding the proto-industrialization, indentured labor, Bretton Woods, right? So they keep on asking these terms. Generally, agar meaning bhi pooch liya, you should have an idea, and the NCERT book covers this. Causes and effect mein, they have talked about like how the Americas transformed the world, because how the Americas or control of Europe over Americas eventually transformed the entire trade of the world. There was the triangular slave trade that is being talked about over here. Then Indian economy in the colonial global system, how the Indian economy got deprived after the colonial control, how the India, which was considered as a Sone ki Chidiya, right? And eventually that particular Sone ki Chidiya was drained by the drain of the wealth system of Britishers. And eventually India was not industrialized, it was deindustrialized. So the wealth was transferred from India to the external world, which is basically the Europe, and in Europe also specifically the Britain, right? So that is there. Then with this theme, the two phases of globalization, opportunity and exploitation, a conventional question can be asked from the perspective of globalization. There is a recurring cycle of the boom, debt, and the crisis. So in the present time period also, in the case of the struggling economies, this is the situation. There is a boom, then eventually in that particular boom situation, it is followed by the debt, and then eventually crisis might be there. And that's where again another thing is the colonial trade structure continue from in the post-colonial form. So the colonization still continues in post-colonial manner, जिसे न्यू colonization कहा जाता है, न्यू imperialism कहा जाता है. Then present connect, indentured labor, contemporary form of the human trafficking, right? Bretton Woods institutions, India's engagement with IMF and World Bank, these are the Bretton Woods twins. G77, new international economic order, right? And current world order related debates that can be discussed. Next is the chapter number 4, age of industrialization. Factual aspect mein there are industrial revolution related certain key terms, key fact that are there. Apart from that, India related certain key fact and key personalities like spinning jenny. There are different type of other equipments including steam engine, printing press. Many things are there, and that eventually ensured the production at a mass scale, right? So that is being talked about. Apart from that, the concepts and terminologies may certain important thing like the putting out system, factory systems, right? Then there is a spinning jenny, jobber, swadeshi. These are the important key terms, and when you read the chapter you will find out important concept and key term, have an idea regarding those terms. Next is the causes and effect relation. So why factories were slow to dominate in Britain? Initially conventional wisdom tha na ki handcrafted things are comparatively more superior, and that's why initially the industrial revolution ke context mein people were apprehensive. But once the scale got increased, once there was more colonies to the Britain, and then those colonies are sending the raw material, and then the finished products in the Britain are now being transferred to those particular markets, then eventually there was a rise of the industrial revolution. क्योंकि जब डिमांड आ रही है, now the supply got boosted. Decline of the Indian trading ports, because हुआ क्या, that India initially was trading with world in equal terms, but then after the arrival of the East India Company, eventually now the position of India got sidelined. India became merely a exporter of the raw material, and that's why the decline of the Indian trading ports, because now the things are being controlled by the East India Company. The conventional ports like the Surat and Masulipattnam got declined, and rise of the new ports like the ports of Kolkata, ports of Madras, ports of Bombay, that got rise. Destruction of the Indian weavers because of the deindustrialization. Themes and patterns में like the technology is not neutral. So the negative aspect of technology, how the industrial revolution created issues. So UPSC can ask these particular thematic questions, and here it's not only provided in this chapter. Whenever you will read any article critical to the industrial revolution, you can take the content from there also, and you can substantiate your argument over here. Colonial deindustrialization, how the India was being made deindustrialized, and it's again that there are weavers related issues, peasantry issues, slave related issues, many other issues are there. Present connect में proto industrialization like gig economy, platform labor. Right now also we are observing in the case of the Rapido, Uber, Ola, Swiggy and other platforms, right? Apart from the Swadeshi, we see the Make in India, Atmanirbhar Bharat, and through that we are trying to talk about the making India a Vikasit Bharat by 2047. So this is the present connect. The last unit is regarding the print culture and the modern world. Obviously not that much relevant from this particular chapter, but still this chapter talks about certain important things. Just say it gives an idea regarding evolution of the painting in the Europe and India, printing in Europe and India. So the printing related important aspect, because see, this printing was one such thing which eventually resulted in the rise of the printing. So printing press bhi banegi, there will be rise of the novel, there will be rise of the newspaper, and this newspaper and the printing eventually will lead or channelize the message of the nationalism to the masses, और वहां से rise of nationalism further strengthen होता है. Talking about the concept and terminologies like the Gutenberg's innovation, print revolution, Protestant Reformation, vernacular press act, many such things that you can get in this particular chapter. Then there is causes and effect. Causes and effect mein first is print and the French Revolution. So how the French Revolution got inspired from the print culture, because hua kya ki there are enlightenment thinker, and these thinkers have written their respective books, and these books talks about the enlightenment ideas. These particular ideas then spread among the masses, and how it spread among the masses, because now through the printing press, now the printing became comparatively easy and cheaper, and that's why larger set of population are able to access this. Similar happened in the case of the newspaper. Once newspaper were comparatively easy to circulate, this resulted in rise of the spirit of nationalism, right? Similarly, print and the Indian nationalism, Indian context में भी यही हुआ. Print and the women's lives, because now the women who were conventionally kept away from the knowledge related system, now they could also access through the print culture these particular type of things, and then there was a rise of the women related awareness. Next is the print culture. Next is the layer 4, which is the themes like knowledge is power and the fight to control it. So see, essay में you will observe, in the essay topics you will observe these type of things, and if you know about these kind of things, you can quote these in the essays like knowledge is a power and the fight to control it, right? Apart from that, complex relationship between the print and women. So these are certain themes. I say कि compared to the other chapter, there are lesser things that are there from the perspective of examination, but still that is there. So just have an idea about this particular chapter in talking about the present relevance. जैसे vernacular press act था 1878 में जो लेकर आया गया, that particular vernacular press act in order to provide the censorship over the printing press. Now internet shutdown, IT Act section 66A, fake news regulation, all these things are the present day regulation on the press, right? Freedom of speech and expression, article 19, and then there are certain exception to that. All these things are there. So these are the important aspect to be noted down from the book. Now see, again I am reiterating, this is not the exclusive list, this is just the indicative one to give you an approach that how you should take or extract the content from the NCERT book. Now lastly, whenever you are done with any of the chapter in the NCERT, like I have discussed in the last class also, ask these 3 questions to you. What is the one most important idea that this chapter contains? Whether it is nationalism, whether it is industrialization, whether it is print culture, have an idea about that. Through this, you will be get to know regarding what is the causes consequence relationship in that. What would I write if UPSC ask a question? Different type of things with respect to that thing. Like critically examine the legacy of this particular period on contemporary India. Not exactly for all chapters, but then with respect to relevant chapter, whether it is globalization, nationalism, or maybe the European nationalism. Then what this particular chapter make me curious about, what do I not understand that I should explore further. So every time when you read any chapter from NCERT, you will think that yes, certain things I have got. Now whenever you will read certain other resources, you will get the content to evaluate. Now once you evaluate that particular content, now you will feel or start feeling confident that yes, I know certain important aspect regarding this. Now refine your notes, create the sections, whether for the factual things, whether for the concept, whether for the causes and effect, whether for theme, ya fir for the present relevance. Make different section and try to collaborate with certain other things. Like for example, just say if you are reading any other new resource, try to take those things in your notes along with certain important thing that we have talked about. So if you are going to follow this approach, then you will be definitely going to cover the NCERT in the most comprehensive aspect. And this is the right approach. I would say, yes, for the majority of the people, this would be the right approach in order to cover the NCERT. Okay? Rather than just reading it and keeping it aside. Okay? So that is it from my side regarding the class 10th NCERT and the suggestive reading for the chapters of class 10th NCERT. We'll meet again with the another NCERT soon. Okay? Chalo. Thank you everyone. I hope that you might have got at least the approach in order to read NCERT. Thank you everyone.